Welcome to episode 14 of Believe in TCU as part of the Believe Network. I'm Zion Trammell, joined alongside Seth Dowdle. We got an exciting episode for you all today as we recap TCU's win over Texas Tech. It was a fun game, great comeback from the Horned Frogs. And then we'll also talk about the Big 12 standings and the new AP poll that came out the other day. But first, a quick check in. Seth, how are we doing to start off this week?
Doing good. It was a lot of fun on Saturday. Uh, I'm gonna be honest with the stuff that we have to talk about today. I'm amped. I'm pumped. This is gonna be a great episode. Um, there's a lot of good stuff happening in college football. A lot of, I would say, controversial things happening in college football. We'll get to that a little bit later. But TCU, how about that, Zion?
How about
Winning
them?
2 consecutive conference games for the first time since 2022.
It's unbelievable. It is a miracle. It is an absolute, and it took a miracle for TCU to win this game. They beat Texas Tech 35-34. They trailed by as many as 17 in that second half, and things looked pretty bleak. Fans started to file out of the stadium, which I personally didn't understand, but it wasn't looking good for the Horned Frogs, and they somehow were able to rally a comeback and knock off the Red Raiders with Eric McAllister scoring that go-ahead touchdown with about 5 minutes to go. A lot of things happened after that, but that was the touchdown that gave TCU the lead. But Seth, let's just talk quickly. What have your initial reactions and thoughts about this win for the Horned Frogs?
Uh, I mean, resilient is the first word that comes to mind. This was a game where the blueprint of the Houston game and the UCF game in particular, um, where TCU starts hot, and then once the scripted drives go away on offense, then they just completely fall apart. Right after those first 2 drives, where TCU has planned out everything that they want to do, uh, it just falls apart. And they didn't score another point until that third quarter, whenever the rally started to get going. But the turnovers were another big issue. Josh Hoover is a turnover machine right now. 3 turnovers in that, was it all in the first half, I think, or was it one in the third quarter? I think, yeah, the
Yeah, I
fumble.
think there was one interception in the third quarter.
Okay, well, 2 picks and a fumble for Hoover. That fumble uh, really swung the momentum. TCU was up 14-3, right? Yeah, 14-3, and had the ball. And if they score there 21-3, that might be ball game. I mean, I know it was early, and obviously TCU was able to come back from a pretty similar deficit, but 21-3, Texas Tech is in the dumps. You have all the momentum, but yet he fumbles. Texas Tech gets this amazing field position. The defense does stop him, and then Texas Tech runs the coolest. Actually, wait, timeout. No, the second coolest fake field goal of the day. Did you see the BYU one where there was a double
Mhm.
snap? Yeah, that was the coolest. Texas Tech runs the second coolest fake field goal of the day for a touchdown, and then Tech takes the lead. They go up 31-14 at one point, and then obviously the comeback happens. Uh, Still don't really understand how. I There was really no moment for me where it was like, oh, TCU's back in it and they are gonna win, or they can win. It was 31-14 at one point, and then all of a sudden Eric McAllister was running down the sideline and it's 35-34. I still don't really I can't comprehend really how that happened. Um, it was just a miraculous thing because TCU really needed this one. I mean, you saw it after the game in the with Sonny Dykes riding the saddle and whatever like that weird water tub was. It was amped in the locker room after the game. They really needed it. Now TCU's 1 win away from a bowl game with 4 games left. So hey, I mean, if the goal for the season was a bowl game, TCU's win today or on Saturday was a good way to get there. But resilient, that's a long way to get back to resilient, I think, because they definitely could have laid down and they didn't.
Yeah, you definitely hit it right on the head there. Resiliency is 100% what TCU showed on Saturday, and you get remembered for winning games against your biggest rivals. And this game meant a lot for both sides who desperately really needed a win for their season. And the fact that they were able to buckle down and despite the turnovers and everything else that was going on, the fact the Frogs are able to pull off this comeback is pretty impressive. And it shows that it really feels like this team has grown a lot since the bye week. You've picked up back-to-back wins, and I don't. I'm not even sure if this team last year would have won this game, and it kind of speaks a little bit to maybe a different identity with this team. But just a tremendous win for TCU, and I think part of what led to this comeback was kind of this bend but don't break in the second half. There wasn't a moment where the defense came up with something huge up until that strip sack there at the end, but the defense what played a huge part in this comeback. They uh, kept the offense in it. They were able to generate enough stops to give the offense the ball, and something clicked offensively. It just felt like that they were able to stretch the field a little bit more, and they were able to do what they've wanted to do offensively. And um, it's like you said, Seth. It's hard to explain. I can't even. It's. I was in disbelief that they were able to even make it a close game, let alone pull off the win.
What's crazy too is you remember a lot during that 2022 season, TCU would be down. There was that whole discourse of TCU keeps knocking out opponents' quarterbacks, and that's how they keep making these big comebacks, right? Well, so Baron
Mhm.
Morton doesn't play really at all in the second half, right? And then the freshman Will Hammond comes in. But even then, I can't point to that moment as being when TCU's comeback started because Will Hammond scored 14 points in the third quarter, right? And like was making it look easy for Tech's offense against the TCU defense. And that was like, oh my gosh, this is perfect, right? A true freshman quarterback is coming in and just carving us up, right? Um, so I can't even point to that moment. I really like if we go by the play by play, let's look at the drive chart in the third quarter because I think that we can maybe yield some information here. So Tech opens the half with the touchdown, right? Um, then or do I have that right? Yes, I do.
Yeah, they
Yes,
opened with the touchdown, then
and then
Hoover
Josh
throws
Hoover
the
throws the
interception.
pick. Yeah, and then they score another touchdown, and that's it's 31-14. Call it almost ball game. But I think this is probably where it flipped. I don't know what was said on the sideline. I don't know what was said or what was, thought by anybody. But then TCU goes 9-play, 75-yard touchdown drive that culminates with a Jeremy Payne 1-yard run, right?
Mhm.
31-21. That showed me that they weren't going to give up because if that was like a 3 and out, then it's definitely ball game. Then they give up the field goal. It was a really long 13-play drive by Tech. And then touchdown, punt, touchdown, fumble, punt, and then the weird pitchy woo woo stuff at the end, and then you got yourself a 35-34 victory. But it was weird because I'm sitting at the dinner table with my family. I went and had a good day on Saturday with family at my parents' house, and I walk in right after Josh Hoover's second pick. That's when we got there, and I was like, guys, might need a quarterback change or something like that, kind of saying facetiously. And my dad goes, "Can we take the true freshman kid? Because this is after he just driven down the field and scored that other touchdown." And then we're sitting there at dinner, kind of not really paying attention to the game because, it's 31-14. And then touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. And before you know it, we haven't even finished the mashed potatoes. And TCU won. All our jaws are on the floor. I mean, describing how this game happened is so odd.
It
I
is.
don't. d- Would
I mean,
would would you? I don't. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of at a loss for words in the sense of, did TCU win this or did Tech really mess this up? Is it a combination of both? I think it might be.
I mean, I think it is a combination of both. I was sitting up in the press box, and I think everyone in the area was just surprised by what was going on because it just it really felt like Tech seized all the momentum. They go up 17 points, and like I said, fans start to file out of the stadium, and it felt like, oh man, this is just another tough defeat here, and it's just kind of a culmination of what's been happening all season. But it just felt like TCU was gonna say, no, 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 we're not gonna let this narrative drive our season. We're not going to let this narrative continue that we just can't. Once we go down, it's hard for us to come back, and we just are going to lay over. No, we're going to bear down, and we're going to put together some good offensive drives. And despite how bad Josh Hoover looked, really at times, he rallied the troops together and made some incredible throws. And I think we finally got to see some of that early season magic that we got with this receiving core. With Savion Williams, he had a monster game, not just on the ground, but through the air. And then Jack Besh got a lot more involved in this offense. He had 4 catches for 77 yards with 8 targets. And then Eric McAllister is kind of that secret weapon who just continues to make big plays with his speed and his physicality. So I think we just got used to TCU not being able to come back in games like this, and they said, "Screw that. We're not gonna lay over. We're actually gonna go out there and win this game." And that's what makes me so happy, personally.
Yeah.
Um, and I'll say this honestly, and maybe I'm forgetting a game. This is as happy as I've been about a TCU win since the Michigan game. Now, obviously, those games hold different weight, obviously. But I don't think TCU had a win last year where I was really fired up and just felt like, yes, like, okay, they've turned the page. They've reached a they've reached a point where they can kind of get going now. I don't think they really had that last season, and they really haven't had it this season. But I think beating Tech at home can breathe life into a program that desperately needed it.
Well, it's really is shades of 2022 because they won so many games similar to this that year. Oklahoma State, Baylor, Kansas State, um, West Virginia even was a tight one. Kansas, they're down, right? It looks like they're out by multiple scores late in the second half. And then touchdown, big stop on defense, touchdown or whatever, right? And then they win, right? The massive comebacks that they had in that 2022 season en route to that ultimate Michigan game in the Fiesta Bowl had a lot of stuff like that. Didn't see it at all last year, right? That group didn't seem like it had any fight in it. And then it didn't really feel like this group had any fight in it because in the Houston game, they had the opportunity to come back, win that game, woof. That was a tight one, but we got it out of there with a dub. They had the opportunity to do that there. They didn't, right? It kind of seems like this group is kind of feckless, right? They have no fight. There's nothing there. But they showed difference on Saturday. And you're right, Sign. I'm fired up. I'm fired up for this. Um, so fired up that we're gonna get in the car and hitch the wagon down to Waco. Uh,
Maybe
hopefully
that's
not
why
get
I'm so excited.
hopefully not
Because
get disappointed.
yeah, because I mean, based on how this game was gonna go, that was gonna depend on whether or not we were going to Waco to watch TCU take on Baylor. If we had lost this game, we probably wouldn't go. Now they won, then we have really something to play for now.
Yeah, because as much as like the 9-3 TCU burner account army claims were after the Houston game, right? Like believe, right? 9-3. As much as that sounded like, lunacy, and it might still be lunacy, honestly, right? But the more you can instill confidence into everybody, the more you feel like that can happen. And I don't think it's going to. I personally think they will drop maybe 1 or 2 games left on their schedule for whatever reason, right? Maybe even Baylor on Saturday. But, they have momentum, and I think momentum is the same thing as confidence. And they have a lot more confidence now, I feel like, these last 2 weeks where they played really gritty games, where they definitely coulda lost both, but they didn't. They won them both. And that instills confidence that you can go out there and play against anybody and maybe have not your great day, maybe not have your best day, but still come out there with a win. And what kind of gives me solace, and I don't know if we'll ever see it, but TCU has not played, I think, a complete game all year, except for LIU. But does that count? I don't think it does. They haven't played a complete game where everything is firing on all cylinders. And maybe if they can get that once out of these final 4 games, they can show us who they truly can be, because I think they can truly be a special team if everything clicks. And that's, you can't say that for every team. If everything clicks for, one team, that doesn't mean that they're going to go out and win, because they don't have the talent profile that TCU does. But I think if TCU goes out there and does everything that they can do to the best of their ability, this team can be really special. Um, and it's unfortunate that they haven't done that, but if they can somehow figure out how to do it, man, I think we have something pretty cool on our hands. Now that's to say, obviously, that they could just fall flat on their face against Baylor on Saturday, because that's kind of the vibe that we got going on in the Big 12. But you're right, Zion. This was a big win, because if they lost this one, we're completely on the polar opposite end of how we're talking right now in terms of like questions about job stability, right? What are we going to do at offensive coordinator? Because it looked like for a while there that this offense had no juice. The defense is
Mhm.
not doing anything. But right now, we forget about all that.
Yeah, because they won. They won, and it was not a pretty win. There was negatives. Offense really stalled in the second and third quarter for the most part, and we saw the turnovers continue to be an issue, and that's something that they'll need to fix up. But we'll save all that for a later episode. This one should be more of a celebratory episode. We should be Let's just celebrate this win over Texas Tech. Later in the week, we'll talk about this matchup with Baylor. It's a big one, and it'll be a great game. Seth and I will be there. Most likely, like 99%
We need the
probability.
the Baylor resale ticket market to be kind to us.
Exactly. Yes. I've never been to a TCU away game before, so if we do end up going, that'll certainly be interesting going up against our biggest rival. But um, yeah, I mean,
Uh,
just last thing I'll say, or go ahead. Were you gonna say
No,
something?
I was like, they're not going to heckle us, are they? Right?
No, no, they'll be totally like, "Hey, welcome in, welcome in." Glad to have you guys. Last thing I'll say just about the game, and after the game, I was heading to the post game press conference. Walked past Josh Hoover and Jamel Johnson, and they just seeing how happy they were, and just it kind of felt like a sigh of relief, like, okay, thank God. We won a home game. We came back and we won this, and it just felt like that the vibes were extremely high. You saw that in the locker room, and I think this team is starting to get some of its confidence back, and hopefully they can translate that moving forward. But we're gonna,
One last thing about you know, the locker room celebration
yeah,
specifically. I don't know what it is, but I feel like Sonny Dykes after the bye week maybe had some reflection a little bit in how he's getting the team ready to go, because they just seem more ready to go these
yeah.
last 2 weeks.
They seem
More
like the more hungry team the last couple weeks.
more like, amped up and ready. Whereas, the other weeks it kind of just felt like he was kind of managing things, you know, not leading necessarily, or he was just kind of facilitating things. It kind of felt like the last 2 weeks, and you've seen how they've responded to him in the locker room after. It feels like something changed. I don't know exactly what, but um, it's whatever it was for good, obviously.
Well, that's a good point that you make because I just remembered that earlier in the week, Lamarion James, Scud James, was saying that he saw a different side of Sonny Dykes in practice for this matchup versus Texas Tech. What that means, I have no idea. And I would have loved to have seen that different side of Sonny Dykes, because he's usually like on the sidelines, he gets fired up at officials and we see that. But, outside of that, and he's just pretty level headed, doesn't, I would have loved to have seen that different side of Sonny Dykes. And maybe we saw that a little bit in the locker room, maybe. I don't know, but it was very interesting. And you're right. I think maybe he did have a different approach as far as leading this team, and it's translated into a couple of wins. Moving forward, now we're looking at the Big 12 standings. TCU is in fifth place. I cannot believe it. They are in fifth place in the ever hectic Big 12 conference. And I think the thing that bothers me the most about it is we really should be 5-1, or we could arguably be 5-0, or at least 4-1 in conference play.
It's
We like
hideous.
like we I mean, that UCF game just completely blew it. And then we lost to Houston. Like, in theory, we really should be arguably undefeated in conference play. And our one loss this season coming to SMU. That felt like it was the one game where it was like, yep, they just beat us.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I hate playing like the should have won game,
I do too.
but the UCF game, I feel like is the patented example of, oh my gosh, you should have won it and you blew it.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
can take like if like you just come out and lay an egg against Houston, like I feel like I can take that, right? It happens
Yeah.
sometimes. Um, Now it shouldn't have happened, but sometimes sometimes you just lay an egg. You're unprepared, stuff happens. But the UCF one is the one where it's like, golly, they should be 4-1 right now in this
Oh,
conference.
yep.
It or
And
5-0 at the at the most, right? Um, yeah, I it's crazy though that they're even in fifth. Now the odds that they get up to the 1 or 2 spot in the conference to make the conference championship game are very slim because you're relying on 4 teams above you to lose quite a bit. Now it could happen. Um, One of BYU or Iowa State would have to lose twice at least, and then some weird tiebreaker stuff would have to happen. Um,
mhm.
I don't know. It's weird. I wouldn't put it past TCU for this to be the weird year where they make the Big 12. Obviously, the Big 12 championship game. The expectation for all of us though is not that right now anymore. That expectation has changed. It's just funny that they're fifth
It is
because
funny.
they were like what, like 14th, like 2 weeks ago.
I had them like after the Houston loss. I think I had them at they were at the bottom, almost in last.
Well, here, listen to this. Houston beat Utah on Saturday. Now, that I feel like is more an indictment of there is some crappy stuff going on in Salt Lake City right now.
It's gotten bad.
Because Utah's 1-4 in conference play after they told us that they were going to run this league. Um, what's going on in Stillwater right now? I have no idea. They're 0-5. I have no clue what's going on there.
Well, I
I have
mean,
no
my
idea.
goodness.
Uh,
0 and
but
5 is bad.
TCU's 2 losses in conference are two teams that have a combined record of 8-10. Um, they lost to UCF and Houston. UCF, I don't know what they benched KJ Jefferson like 3 weeks ago, and like I some the needless to say, the UCF and Houston losses are ugly, and the SMU loss is also ugly. And uh, let's just say that TCU, if they finish 9-3 and then don't make the Big 12 championship game, will not be getting an at-large bid to the college football playoff because they have 3 hideous losses.
Yeah, those losses I could handle if it was, if you lost to like BYU, Iowa State, and some whoever. And I guess SMU is having a good season, but the teams that you have lost to and the way you've lost them are not good, and um, that is the unfortunate part. But I can't. I'm just happy that we're even in the conversation, no matter how slim the odds are. I'm just happy to be here. Just happy to
It
be here.
I'm happy to be here too. It's fun that, TCU games kinda matter now to some
They
extent.
do.
Um, Now, you let's kinda just game plan this, right? You beat Baylor, you're 6-3. You're going to a bowl game. That's good. TCU, believe it or not, has not been going to a lot of bowl games recently. Now, I know they made the national championship 2 years ago, but prior to that, they had not made a bowl game, or they not played in a bowl game. They made a bowl game in 2020, but they didn't play in it because of COVID. They had like a COVID outbreak, but they made a bowl game in 2020. I just want to make that clear. Um, but prior to that, they weren't making bowls in 2018, 2019, and 2021.
Was the last bowl game the Cheez It Bowl?
The last bowl game that TCU played in that was not a college football playoff game was indeed the 2017 Cheez It Bowl,
Goodness.
or the
That's
2018 Cheez It
crazy.
Bowl. The
Yeah,
2018 Cheez It Bowl.
2018. Oh my goodness. That's crazy.
The 7 interception
Wow.
classic between TCU and Cal that ended like 10-7
Man,
in overtime.
that was wow. That's crazy that was the last time before the college football playoff. But yeah, I mean, now they've got a really good shot. They got a really good shot of getting a bowl game. If they don't, that's something must have gone just drastically wrong. I mean, given their schedule, Baylor, Oklahoma State, Arizona, and Cincinnati. Uh, Two of those teams, Oklahoma State and Arizona, are those they are one last and second to last in the Big 12, and Baylor is not far ahead of them. So
Listen, I would give TCU a fair shot at winning all 4 of those games.
absolutely, they're going to be in every game. Are they going to win all of them? Maybe, maybe not, but they will be competitive in all of them for sure. Before we go, Seth, you had a series of tweets yesterday regarding the new AP Top 25 poll, and look, it's pretty ugly. It's not good. Um, does losing even matter anymore?
Apparently, it matters more than winning, in terms of that you will get elevated because of those losses. All right, let's talk about it. All right. Indiana is ranked 13th in the AP poll, 2 weeks removed from spanking Nebraska 54-7 or whatever the score was, 56-7. And then they beat Washington pretty handily last week with a backup QB. And they stayed at 13. They're 8-0 for the first time in forever. Maybe first time ever. I have no idea. No team has lost more college football games in the FBS than Indiana. I feel like of all the teams that we should be putting in the top 10 right now because it's an awesome story, it's the Indiana Hoosiers. And yet they're ranked 13th behind teams that have lost to I'm just gonna say like if Indiana's ceiling is like 7, right? Like where Tennessee is right now. Tennessee's at 7. Tennessee lost to Arkansas. Behind Tennessee is Notre Dame, who lost to NIU.
NIU.
Texas A&M is at 10, who lost to the Notre Dame team, who lost to NIU, and then the Georgia, who lost pretty ugly to Georgia in the first game of the year. Sure, the Georgia loss for Clemson and a Notre Dame loss for A&M are quality losses, but I'd argue that no losses is better than one quality loss.
I tend to agree. Could you imagine if TCU had the year that they had 2 years ago, where they would be right now.
They really got a really good luck of the draw with how all the rest of the sport played that year to
Exactly.
get into the college football playoff, because there's a world where like they lose the Big 12 title game and they're 12-1. They don't make it if USC wins the Pac-12 championship game.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, they really got a good luck because like the sixth team in that year had 2 losses. It was like Alabama had 2 losses.
Yeah, Bama, and then, or was Bama
Tennessee both had 2.
5?
Bama and Tennessee both had 2 losses, and um, so
But yeah, I agree. I mean, Indiana 100% deserves to be ranked a little bit higher. Why Notre Dame is at 8 is, it just puzzles me. It really does. It puzzles me. Um, I don't know, and I would argue maybe. I mean, who else do we have here in the top 12?
listen,
Oh, Colorado
Alabama at
is
14
ranked.
is
Okay,
malpractice. Alabama at 14 is
yeah.
malpractice.
I mean, I would argue Boise State should be ahead of them, but
Listen,
I don't know.
Alabama, who has 2 losses, and they're 2 pretty ugly losses, I'd say. They did not play well against Vandy. They lost to frickin' Vanderbilt, and they lost to Tennessee, and they did not look really. I mean, I know it was only a 7-point game, but that game easily could have been like 50. I'm not 50, but that could have been a pretty big Tennessee blowout had Nico hit a couple wide open touchdown passes.
Mhm.
Um, Alabama, who has 2 losses, is ahead of these teams that have 1 or 0 loss. Boise State, Kansas State, Pitt. Pitt is 7-0. What are we doing? Pitt is 7-0 and is at
Mhm.
18. Did no one watch them play Syracuse on Thursday night?
No, nobody did.
Um,
Well,
SMU is 7-1. Army is 7-0. Washington State is 7-1. Um, BYU at 9. Iowa State dropped and they didn't even play. What are we doing?
like, it makes no sense. And then, you were talking about how one-loss teams are ahead of, undefeated teams. Texas beat Vandy, and they dropped down. What, they were 5 and they dropped 1 spot to 6, and that's not even, I know that's not drastic, but so they moved Miami, who is undefeated, ahead of the one-loss team, but then they won't move Iowa State or Indiana, who's also an undefeated team, ahead of a one-loss team in Notre Dame. I don't.
And here's the most egregious one. The most egregious one sits at 25. Get Missouri out the paint.
What is Missouri doing there? They are 2-2 in conference.
They have lost a combined 75-10 against ranked opponents.
Yeah, they do not deserve to be there.
Missouri, okay, here's crazy. Here's a crazy thing. So Vandy was what? Vandy was 25th, right? And
Yeah.
Vandy dropped out.
Yeah, they
So
barely lost to Texas, a really
the
good team.
AP poll said, okay, losing to Vandy, we're gonna drop you
Mhm.
because that's pretty bad. And then they just like they don't keep Vandy there.
It doesn't make much sense. And I guess you could argue that all that matters is at the end of the season, but it is just the concept of it right now, and where teams deserve to be ranked. And these things are important to programs.
They are, and so like the first college football playoff rankings come out on Tuesday. I'm sure nothing else is happening that night. And
TCU
they
women's basketball is happening that
yes,
night.
TCU plays Houston Christian at 6:30 p.m. On ESPN Plus. Everyone, the nation turns their eyes, as Nick Giaramonti says. it's the fight in Haley Van Lith's. Um, so they come out, and sure, like theoretically, that ranking is like wiping the slate clean and just ranking everything. Like, you know what I mean? Like we've seen no polls prior to this, but the committee members pay attention to these things, and that builds
Mhm.
like an innate bias, right, into them and what they think. So these rankings absolutely do matter, even if it, at the end of the day, what matters is what the committee says on whatever, like December 3rd, whenever, I don't know what day exactly the final
Yeah.
rankings are. But I mean, if Indiana had an M or an Ohio State logo or a Penn State logo or any other logo, and they had the exact same resume that they did right now, they'd be ranked what, like third?
Probably. It's
Just
uh it's
just
wild.
because at the beginning of the year you didn't think Indiana was going to be good doesn't mean that they're not good now. And that's what really is a shame, that they refuse to throw away their preseason bias.
Yeah. 100% agree. These committee members, they have to have a baseline to, you know, have for their rankings in the future, and that's kind of what they're going to refer to as the current AP poll. Um, it sucks, but we'll see. Hopefully, it'll get better as the coming weeks in the coming weeks here as we get closer and closer to the college football playoff. Um,
I
one
just
would
saw the
think.
coaches poll and it's arguably even worse.
Oh Lord, we may have to discuss that after the show here.
They have Missouri at
Um,
23.
okay. Oh man. Oh gosh, I don't even know if I want to hear the rest. It's wild here. College football has had a tremendous season so far. There's just been so many cool stories, so many upsets. But definitely at the top, we have the usual suspects of, you know, top programs in college football there at the top. It'll be fun to see how this turns out. It'll be interesting to see how the Big 12 winds up being, and who gets into the college football playoff, who gets into the Big 12 championship. And TCU certainly put themselves an invite. They've given themselves an invite. They're happy to be there. They're on the outside looking in, but they haven't completely knocked themselves out of it. It'll be fun to watch. Later in the week, we will preview TCU versus Baylor. That game will be in Waco on Saturday at 7 o'clock and should be a fun matchup. But that'll wrap things up here for this episode of Believe in TCU. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. You can follow us on Instagram at Believe in TCU, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can hear us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts at the same name, all with Believe in TCU. So for Seth Dowdle, I'm Zion Trammell. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time. And as always, go Frogs.